You're listening to another Ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
You're listening to the award-winning podcast, The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, featuring business leaders to help you navigate a constantly changing marketplace. Want to become known as a trusted authority while building a thriving business you love? The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show will show you how. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, brought to you by the Influence Alliance, which is the business building community for coaches and consultants who want to make a much bigger impact in the world with their message, whilst also build a profitable and scalable business. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Now, my guest today says every minute you spend with a customer is a minute that your competition isn't. And joining me on today's show is Gary Hernbroth. Now, Gary, he is a transformative and an in-demand professional speaker and business trainer and coach, inspiring audiences via virtual and in-person customized programs. Now, he's known for his straightforward, pulls no punches approach to helping organizations, teams, and individuals kick up their game in the area of sales, leadership, customer care, personal branding, and teamwork synergies, all very important. Now, on today's show, Gary's going to share how we can discover 5 immediately useful takeaways for leading our teams and managing processes in this reawakening economy. We're also going to learn how to gain keys on the importance of training in these worker shortage times, as well as how to build on the leadership skills that we have without being entrenched in the past. All very important topics for a day as today, a time as today. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It's great to be here today.
Gosh, if we had have gone back 2, maybe 3 years, I'm sure that individually across the world, business leaders would not have even predicted that we would find ourselves in a situation where we are today. And I think they say, that saying change continues to come more and more rapidly. And business leaders around the globe have had to embrace new technologies to be able to lead team, to be able to deliver services and products, to be able to speak and share their message far greater. And I think there's about 6 years worth of change all rammed into a shorter period of time. So I'm glad we're going to be talking to you today, because I know that you're drawing from a lot of your expertise and really sharing, how do we move forward? What's the best way to navigate through this? So I'm just going to dive in and ask you to share what are these 5 immediately useful takeaways for leading teams and managing processes in this reawakening economy?
Well, thanks, Anne-Marie, and you're so right. I refer to it as, in a way, the meteor hit the Earth. Okay, the meteor hit the Earth back in early spring, first quarter of 2020, and in some cases, a lot of the meteor is still here. We're always changing, and change is constant. I mean, that's the old adage in the book. But the truth of the matter is, I'm like all the other business folks probably out there. I had a game plan for 2020. It looked very strong. In fact, I did quite a lot of traveling in the first quarter of 2020. We were hearing something was off on another continent, and maybe it was there and it wasn't here yet, and so a lot of business is going in, and all of a sudden, boom, the bottom drops out. So as a business person, you're not ready for that. You're not prepared for that. There's really no playbook for that, right? I mean, I have a business degree. I majored in hospitality management at Michigan State University, but certainly nothing back then prepared me for this now, as it didn't for anybody else either. So where's the playbook for that? Where do you go for that? So I worked through as best I could my own shredded business schedule, if you will, and talked to many clients. I did programs like this, and they were searching for answers and whatnot. So I started to cobble together some commonalities, and in not only successes but also how people were failing and what they were failing at, trying to help them. And I did come up with 5 what I call kind of leadership keys for kind of an evolving picture, understanding that it's a very flexible playbook, right? Maybe we used to print a playbook, and at least we did back in my day too. You go get it spiral bound, and it was the Bible you followed all year long, and this and that, and it was very rigid. And not anymore. I think we're printing playbooks in jelly, because you have to have some change. But that doesn't mean that you just allow events to take you over, right? Because a good leader, great leader, let me say, has to find a way to, of course, they're part of a firefighter, right? You've got to put out the fire that's immediately in front of you, whether it's on your team, your business, with your customers, in your economy, whatever industry you're in. You've got to have some firefighting skills. But if that's all you ever do, then that's all you're ever going to do is chase the next fire. And that's not leading, that's reacting. So how do you, that's a fine line. I don't have all the magic beans about that. I don't think anybody does, but I do know that you have to flip that key and get into proactive leading and thinking about and planning things. You can't just be a firefighter, and it's important. So the five keys that I came up with, I'll be glad to talk about with you here today for our listeners.
I'd love to dive in. And before you dive into those 5 key points, I mean, you've set this conversation up beautifully in that as leaders, we have to find a way to navigate through being open to shift and pivot. And one of the things that have become apparent for all the hundreds of interviews, even thousands of interviews that I've done over the last, number of years, is as leaders, we often have this assumption that we have to know everything, and we don't. And so being able to say to our teams, look, many of us are navigating through this as we're going along. So create an environment in which they feel safe enough to come up with ideas, because the one idea that someone shares as a leader, if you can navigate and help them expand on that, may just be the idea that kind of navigates through that. So, and being able to know when to decision make, when to allow that. And so I think these 5 keys are going to be incredibly helpful. What's the first one, Gary?
Well, the first one, the entire premise, let me set the table beautifully on what you just said, okay? Because leadership, some people seek leadership. They're driven by becoming a leader. Some people want to be called a leader without really having to get in there and do it. They just want the title, whatever. And, I've always looked at it this way, Anne-Marie. Leadership is not a title or a rank. Leadership is a way of operating, right? I mean, you could be in the first grade in elementary school, and they give you a 4 or 5 kids to put together a science project, and you'll get a leader to evolve out of that. Now, they didn't go to any formal leadership school or whatever, but it's kind of thrust upon them. So I really believe it's in someone's DNA to lead. So it's more, it's for me, it's never a rank. It's never your title. It's how you operate. It's how you roll. The first one is to clearly communicate the mission. What gets measured gets done, and what gets understood gets done quicker and better. So if you don't communicate the mission, you're going to have everybody, you're going to have different parts of your business all cattywampus, maybe trying to think that they're doing it the right way. Then you've got to stop and pull people in. So without communication, I just did a seminar in Fort Worth this week, and we spent a lot of time talking about communication. So we were communicating about communication, and it's usually the root of a lot of success, but it sure is the root of a lot of evil, right? When you don't have it, or you have poor communication. So you've got to clearly communicate that mission. And a good leader is going to make sure that the folks that are leading the teams underneath that leadership model and our leaders on the next level, they understand it. So it's one thing for me to communicate it to you, okay? I say the sentence, or I write the memo, or whatever, and I feel good about that because I've made it so clear and everyone understands it. There's no guarantee that they do. I used to do a little test where I have many people read the same memo, and I'll guarantee you I had several dozen takeaways from there. And we test that. So that works. So get that going. That sets every other wheel in motion when you've got that strong communication. The second one is, okay, now what do? We prioritize. What's job one? What's job one? I can understand the mission that the leader or the business entrepreneur or the boss gives me, but if I don't understand what my job one is, understanding it is only half the game, right? So you've got to prioritize, because you can't do everything all at once. I'd like someone to tell me what multitasking really means. Because to a business owner, does it mean that you can be on 2 phone calls at once? Does it mean that you can be sitting with an employee and trying to coach them and you're texting at the same time? Does it mean that you're with two customers at the same time having the same lunch? You used one of my quotes at the top of your show, and it really is something I've been saying for years. Every minute that I spend with a customer, whether it's on the phone, in person, dialoguing somehow, is a minute that those folks out there trying to get their business aren't spending with them, right? And so I figure use that time wisely. So, prioritize what is your priority? Is it getting your business in order? Is it getting your customers in order? But without priorities, again, everything goes this way and sideways, and you're counterproductive. And you can have some very good people underneath you that are frozen into inaction or with such rigidity because they haven't been given the rules of engagement. So the leader has to give those rules of engagement. The third one is gather your necessary resources. A good leader is responsible for really three things, Anne-Marie: the ways, the means, and the end. And the ways and the means, the end is sometimes almost the easiest one. Hey, there's our goal. That's the end. Here's where we're going to want to be. This is our true north. Okay, so that's easier to define. The means is, what are we going to do? Well, the resources that we're going to need to do that. So, the resources we may have to get. Do we need money? Do we need more people? Everybody needs more people today. I mean, boy, just coming back from a trip to another part of the country in business this week, everything is well. We don't have the labor. We can't be open certain hours. We can't deliver this. We can't, entire cities, the restaurants close at 9 because they can't stay open any further. That's the Hampshire style. But the number one, I think the number one resource that a manager or a leader of people or a leader of a team can really manage, and this isn't often thought of, it's kind of a tricky concept. It's time.
Yes.
It's time. Leaders are always out doing things, they're doing the things I'm talking about. But when you think about it, we're responsible for the ways, the end, and the means of what we're trying to do. But on top of that, we've only got a limited amount of time. Customers will only be interested in us for a certain amount of time. They only have a certain amount of time because maybe their customers are pushing them. So a great leader is one who can marshal his or her resources. And when I say gather the resources, what's the most important thing for us? So these all flow together, right? So we're communicating the mission. I'll just quick review. What are we trying to accomplish? What's our true north? What's the priority? Let's set the priorities and get everybody, let's define roles, goals, responsibilities, guidelines, limitations, if you will. But then let's manage our resources properly, and one of them has got to be time, because you can be on top of a lot of things, but if you let time slip, doesn't matter. End game. Leaders also, point number 4, show confidence and courage. People today, some of them are, they're shell shocked, right? Because they're coming back. In some cases, they're coming back to the job that they left over a year ago, and it doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
Nothing looks the same, right? They could be the last person standing from a team that was 15, 20, 25, 35, 40 people. They're gone. And now you're a true survivor. You're like, well, what do I do now? A year and a half ago, I had to pull rabbits out of my hat with 30 people. Now I've got to pull bigger rabbits out of my hat. I've got me or 2 or 3 of us or 4, whatever. So show confidence and courage by first of all, you're going to have to allow mistakes to happen. And this is not new from COVID. A good leader always allows mistakes to happen, because to me, I would go back to my coaching days. It always told me that the kid was trying, right? They were at least trying, and they didn't do it right. So we stopped the action, had a coaching moment, showed them how to do it, redirect them, give them some chances to practice again so they could fix it. But they're at least trying. So you can't, you have to manage that situation too. But confidence and courage is the time that we're in right now. Everyone's jittery, right? Vaccines and shutdowns and what do I do? And our customers are nervous too. So if we make decisions now, all eyes and ears are watching us as leaders. We've got to make good decisions. And in some ways, we've got to be very, 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 very good salespeople. That's not usually a quality that's talked about in leadership management or anything like that, but I talk about it because I've spent part of my career as a leader and a manager and part of my career in sales. And I know that the two go hand in hand. And I asked a group of people yesterday that sales is not on their job description. They have no title of sales. And I said, how many people in this room are a salesperson? No hands went up. And yet I showed them how in their own way, they're selling every day. I said, is anyone here convinced another employee or their boss to do something or move X to Y? Oh yeah, I've done that. Okay, you were persuasive? Oh yes, I presented a case, I had a good idea, and now we're doing it this way. Aha, you were selling. You were selling your idea. You're on the front line. You saw some kind of hocus pocus thing and you thought, well, this doesn't work. Maybe there's a better way to do it. We did it this way before COVID, but now things have changed. So maybe we could do it this way. You're selling your idea. So you're in sales. So it's very, they run very, very similar. And I always told leaders and managers this when I'm coaching them, and I still do, and I'm going to continue to do it. The last thing that you should be in is a popularity contest. This is not high school. You're not running for student council or prom king or queen or something like that. You're not going to please everyone all the time. And great leaders, right? You probably know this, and I'm sure you've had some on your show before. You're not going, first of all, you're not going to get it all right anyway. Nobody makes all the decisions, right? So admit your own ego and go, okay, but you're still, even when you make tough decisions, to show that courage and confidence that I mentioned earlier with point 4, you're not going to please everybody. And no one says you have to, right?
That's
just not going to happen. It's not real world. I don't know if you have children or people out there who have children, but you can't certainly manage more than one child the same way, right? And have the same effect. They're all so different. Okay. And then the last point is consistency. A leader has to be consistent. I go back to a quote from the writer Rudyard Kipling. And I found this quote years ago, and it just kind of hit me. And I'll read it for you. It says, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. And I think, wow, what about that, right? Because every leader has a peanut gallery somewhere. And by that, I mean, peanut gallery. Everybody sitting there, oh, we should have done that. Oh, didn't we know this? And why can't we be doing that? Well, then they're thrust into some kind of supervisory leadership. They find out it's not so easy. But everyone likes to complain when they're not the leader. I like this quote because leaders, they may not always make a decision that I like or that personally is my comfort zone or what have you. But in these times, if a leader is at least consistent, if they hold people accountable, things like accountability is a huge issue today. We might get into that later if we have time. But those are the 5 things right there that if you're a leader that manages your resources, communicates the mission clearly, prioritizes things, stays on task, show that confidence and courage, and then be consistent, you're going to be ahead of the game because, as I mentioned before, you've got new faces in new places doing things differently. Oh, by the way, with different customers and their different buying habits. So while we don't throw everything away pre-COVID, we take the good things that we were doing that I think really are the root things and things I'm talking about really did apply, they applied then too, but maybe we do them a little differently now. Yeah. So I kind of fight that urge that some people say, oh, COVID changed everything. Well, it changed a lot of things, but it didn't change everything. And I think, I hope the audience is going to take away today that the things I'm talking about today are good fundamental things that will never go out of style. Good economy, bad economy.
No matter what's going on, that's right. And I mean, as you're sharing those key points there, and I agree with all of them. I mean, you would imagine that a leader that even though they may not agree with something or put an idea forward that you might have suggested, if there's a level of respect that you have with your leader, and as if they do work with integrity and all of the things that you mentioned, and consistency and the stability, you have confidence in that leader. I think there's trust that even though that they may not agree with you, as an employee, you can get behind that person. I think that's really important as a leader to be able to have that consistency. And even, if I think of a time as an example, even with my husband, there may be some times where he's not sure of something, but he has this stoic manner about him, and that infuses that trust in me that I'm gonna go in that direction, because and we always kind of see that through. And I think as leaders, we need to balance that. And I love all of those 5 things. The communication, I think, that you started with at the beginning, whilst all of these are very important, and together collectively they're all important. Even if we're not able to communicate and do all of the other things, if we can't communicate that vision and can't communicate and influence, if we will, it's going to be very difficult, no matter how good our idea is, if people aren't understanding us. So it always goes back to communication, and it doesn't matter what challenge that we're in, how many team members that we have, whatever. Communication is key, isn't it?
Well, it really is. And, let's face it today. I mean, this is my opinion, but, and you'll have yours and the viewers will have theirs. But I think we're all getting our feelings hurt a little bit too much these days. To me, a leader, right? Well, sure. I could say that I'm wearing a blue shirt today and something else, and what's wrong with a brown shirt, or a green shirt, or a yellow shirt, or what? I don't know what it. You can't keep up with that. Yeah. But a good leader is solid, because although, and I need to kind of be mature myself as someone who is talking to a leader. If I may not like everything that leader says. But I need to be mature about it. That, okay, I may not like everything they say, but at least I know where they're coming from, yes, and what they stand for. I mean, Anne-Marie, a leader that makes tough calls and is in tough positions a lot and makes tough calls. I may not agree with all their calls, but I need to be mature enough as one of the staff or a frontline person or mid manager or whatever. I need to be mature enough to understand that, what, it is tough at the top, and they're not always going to please me, but it can't always be about me. And I have to say, well, you know what? They were in a tough position. Okay, they did something, and maybe that was my friendly coworker that I really liked. But you know what? They were out of line, and the leader had to reel them back in, and they had to make a tough call. That's the thing about leadership, is it's always easier when you're not doing it, right? And I call it's kind of like it's a term that I put in an article recently called shifting sand leadership. And I know that you and I traded some emails about that concept. And I assume you've been to the ocean. You've walked the ocean. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we all like to walk the ocean and get our ankles wet and do whatever we do, body surf, or maybe just look at the ocean. But when you walk in the ocean and you start to go in maybe a couple feet, have you ever let the sand just kind of swallow in and take your feet maybe up to the ankles? Okay. And you say, oh, that feels good. And, oh, this is nice. I'm on solid ground, right? And then what happens when a wave comes in, right? And that wave hits your feet and everybody's, oh, it's cold. But what happens after that wave passes and then starts to draw back into the ocean? Yeah, what happened to that sand
with it, doesn't it?
Right. All of a sudden, now your ankles have no more sand around them. Your toes, you can feel yourself losing grip in that pull, riptide or whatever you want to call it. But that wave starts to pull back, and a good leader has to make sure that they're ready for that moment, because it is so easy to manage when the sun's out every day and everything's perfect and sales are ringing and you have your hands under the faucet to catch all the water from the revenue stream that you have. You can't catch it all. Employees are happy. Everything's great. That's easier to manage. But on the cloudy, dark, stormy days, when you've got that sand shifting away from your feet and your toes and you're no longer on solid ground, that's when a leader really earns their pay. And they've got to be ready to not just enjoy, oh, this feels good, this is great, I'm on solid ground. I want to work for a leader and watch their true grit when that sand starts to go back in the ocean. It's like, oh, now what are we going to do, boss? What are we going to do? Do I work for an organization where the leader is going to say, okay, no one likes what we're going through, but we have some core strengths that we do, the fundamentals I mentioned earlier. Not a flavor of the month club. Leadership cannot be a flavor of the month club, but we have these core principles in leadership. communication, all the things that we mentioned, that I'm going to stand behind that leader or with that leader, and we're going to fight it, because that's going to even it out. The businesses that fail, sometimes it's not their fault. I mean, they were maybe in the business that ran its course, or they got trampled down by their competition or whatever. But oftentimes, Anne-Marie, I feel like it was eaten from the inside out, right? And they didn't have these core principles that I've been talking about today. There's a couple I'd like to share, if you'll let me share with the audience, in terms of being a small business owner.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
One of them is make everyone in your organization a salesperson. Okay. Now, I'm not a fan of bumper stickers. So this is why this is more than a bumper sticker, because of the thing I mentioned earlier. If you've got people who are front facing the customer, make them a salesperson, and not all that in your face selling. Like, okay, well, you ready to buy? You want one of these? I got three. Here's a pen, a marker, and a pencil. Which one would you like? That's not the kind of selling I'm talking about. But they should be front facing the customer with the idea that let's give the customer what they want, and let's put them in the driver's seat and send them home with something they really need, and really want. So everyone in the organization should be a salesperson and think like that, whether it's internal or external. I want even the people in accounting up on third floor to be thinking like salespeople, because if we're front facing that, and remember I mentioned True North earlier. If our True North is all about keeping and getting customers, that's going to work. So I believe the two missions of any business, whether you're a sports team, you make bicycles, you make donuts, doesn't matter to me. Your two key missions, and leaders out there, please get this: the acquisition and retention of customers. And everything else falls after that. Everything else, the acquisition and retention of customers. And I'm really passionate about that. If you don't get enough customers, game over, right? It's over. I mean, if you don't retain the customers you have, it's also game over. It just takes a little longer, right? Yeah. The second thing is the silos. A good leader recognizes when silos start to go up in the organization. You got to shatter those silos. You can't have departments that don't talk to each other, or people that don't talk to each other. They don't communicate. They don't do anything. The silos are not a good thing. Okay. And then I like to challenge folks, whether it's the leader or the person, far removed from the leader on the chart somewhere. How have I helped my customers, my team or organization, and myself move forward in some way today, some little way today? And you don't always have to think about the big, huge strides, right? Oh, I'm not in a position, I can't really impact my customers that much. I have this, no, everybody, if you don't impact the customer, then you impact someone who impacts the customer. That's why you're on the sales team. Okay. How have I impacted my customers, my team and organization, and myself in some small way today? How have I helped those entities? And I mean for myself too, because we all need enrichment in our work too. How have I helped move it forward? Maybe I cut 4 feet of red tape for somebody today. Maybe I just eliminated some red tape, or came up with an idea and helped somebody out of a sticky situation. That's okay. If that happens, you've had a good day. And leaders have to build that atmosphere in their organization where they have people looking for that and striving for that and wanting to move it forward. Again, there are times when firefighting is called for. I mean, we all were firefighting last year, right? And you're still going to be firefighting at some point. But you've got to get out from behind that reactive thing and get into the proactive thing. Easier said than done.
Yeah. I mean, all of the points that you've mentioned are just so important. And I know that you also want to touch on some of the keys of importance of training, because as you mentioned earlier, there is a lot of organizations, I should say, that are experiencing worker shortage. And in fact, a few of my colleagues who are involved in the HR industry, particularly over in the US, are even talking about what they're calling the great resignation, because many people are thinking, well, I don't want to go back to work and work full time. We've experienced a hybrid, if you will, of working at home, or I would like to start my own business, all these different things. A couple of things that I wanted to mention on, and I'd love for you to spend a little bit more time in investigating this as we're nearing the end of this interview today. mentioned that, everyone in the organization should start to look at themselves as sales people, influencing, because, you may do something that eliminates red tape, that enables someone else to get a quote out quicker to a customer, or deliver a service or a product with even more, speed or whatever, that ultimately impacts customer satisfaction and referrals. So we need to do that because our teams may have shrunk and we may not be able to get as many people on the team. Would you say that it is important, as even now organizations, no matter what size that we're at, I know smaller businesses, we tend to be a little bit more multifaceted in what we do across the business, but that the people that we hire are not just, this is one role that you do, but you have a capacity to be able to also shift and support other, areas of the business, which may fall, within the aspect of your, the team, the as you said, silo, no, but there may be like marketing. So you're not just doing one aspect of marketing, but a number of different things. I'd love you to share some ideas and some thoughts and things that you're seeing in the workplace.
It's a very compelling question that you pose. And I think what comes to mind most is for an owner, an entrepreneur, a leader, a company, if you will, to figure out, okay, we had it really good. We had a really good product, and demand and all this kind of thing. And now, well, we've got this product and, we've tweaked it, we've done whatever, but we don't know about our demand anymore. We don't know, now supply chain problems come into the issue. How, scratching your head, how do we get our product to market the way we used to and have it look like it used to do, it used to look, smell like it used to smell, taste like it used to taste, with less hands on deck? How do we do more with less? And the way not to do it, okay, I guess the first thing I would say is how not to do it is what I'm seeing a lot of today is, because of the labor shortage, there's this rush to put a body into a place. Just put a warm breathing body in there and we'll get the staff back up, and then we'll be able to get our product back that was so great before COVID, and then we'll be fine. And let's just get some bodies in there. Well, guess what they're not doing enough of? Training and development and coaching that person. I mentioned it earlier. You may be bringing back people that were in your organization before, but that organization has changed. The market's changed. Your products changed. Your deliveries changed. It's all changed. So they're like a veteran, but coming into a new, to fight a new war, right? Yeah. It'd be like bringing a revolutionary gun that someone carried up Bunker Hill and bringing it to World War II on D-Day, right? It's not going to do. It's not. Taking time machine soldier going, I'm ready to go. Well, I've got a flintlock. Okay, flintlock used to work really good. Right,
or whatever skills.
Right,
yeah.
And so we throw them in. So let's just get bodies in. Okay, we're not and then what happens is, Anne-Marie, and here's the crux of it: the customers are feeling this now. I wrote something recently on social media, and I wrote it with as much kindness as I could. But you know what? I'm not getting a lot of really enthusiastic service, whether it's, and I don't want to name any industries, but it's kind of across, whether it's retail, well, I guess I just did name them, but retail or sometimes hospitality or whatever. And that's kind of what I'm trying to help here is, it's one thing to be short-staffed, because that's the wallpaper paste, right? We're short-staffed, and that excuses a lot of things. And then you get this receipt there that says suggested tip. I actually saw one the other day that said suggested tip, and it started at 20%. Wow. It was 20, 30, and 40%. And it was lousy service. It's one thing to say we don't have enough bodies, but it's another thing to say we don't have bodies that are engaged, interested, talented, or trained. You see? So for all the leaders out there, you have to staff up. I keep hearing this. We've got to staff up. We've got to bulk up. We've got to get, that's great. But you wouldn't throw an athlete on a field without a day of practice just to say they're wearing a football helmet and pads and cleats and they're ready to play football. That doesn't make a football player. What you have is a kid standing there with football helmet and cleats on there, can't play football. Or how about somebody, here, kid, grab a tuba, join the marching band.
Yes.
I don't know anything about tuba. Doesn't matter. We just need somebody to
look like you do.
We have this halftime show, and we need somebody to be the end person to dot the T or dot the I, so that you're it. and I don't know the tuba. Well, just stand there and pretend, that's not good enough. That doesn't make them a tuba player. It doesn't make them a band member, So we do this in business all the time. Just get bodies in there. We're not training. We're not working. And I'm not just shilling for training. I mean, we know how important it is training and coaching and upskilling and what all these fancy HR words, right? What it is getting people up to speed. And again, I'll pose a question that maybe you can visit to some future guest on this show. Is it better just to have someone out there on the floor that's going to do you harm with their lack of knowledge, their lack of understanding about your product, their lack of smiling, their lack of customer service? Is it better to have that person on the floor taking care of your customers or attending to your customers, they're not taking care of them, and have customers leave and go, well, that's it. This isn't the place it used to be. Okay, we're not coming back here, Martha. We're just not going to. Or is it better to have maybe a few less people, but be more selective with better people that will then cross-train others and pick up the speed and kind of elevate the group, I mentioned bumper sticker before, Anne-Marie. I love debunking this one, right? Rising tide lifts all boats. No good. A rising tide lifts all boats only if the boat is waterworthy, only if the boat doesn't have holes in it, only if the boat can hold, can be buoyant. A rising tide lifts all the other boats. This boat stays with the water in it. It doesn't go anywhere. So that rising tide lifts all boats, I think, is a bunch of bunkum. You've got to have a waterworthy craft in order to rise with that tide. And a lot of people are thrown out onto the floor. They're not waterworthy yet. So I would say to leaders and owners, I know the job market is tough out there, but is it better to have someone there who's not as capable or you don't invest in anything? People don't pick up the stuff by osmosis. They don't just show up, like I said, be a tuba player, a football player, whatever you fill in
what is modeled to them. And if nothing is modeled to them and shown how to do a good job, they will fill in their own narrative, won't they? And
how do I
behave in a way that they think. And
how do we want you answering questions when a customer asks us a question? One of my frustrations is when I ask questions these days, the employees don't seem to know. Now, I'm cutting a lot of people slack. I'm going, well, obviously this isn't their life's work, and they've just been, so I'm not, I don't talk and act like this in front of them the way I am on your show because I'm so animated about it. So I do cut the slack, but I don't think that a shortage is an excuse for bad service or bad attention or uncaring employees. See, that's the thing. People confuse. And I do have friends that'll say, well, Gary, now, the labor shortage. So I don't know that has anything to do with an uncaring employee.
No, and it shouldn't. I would say that if you went to, we'll say hospitality, and there was a shortage, and there may have been a longer waiting time. Imagine if the person who was your server was friendly, was helpful, came and, those kind of, that experience, we are forgiving, aren't we, for certain things. But if every single interaction is so rude, that experience and the compound effect, if you will be what we take away and what will base our decision to whether to go back or not.
There were many shortages on my recent business trip that I just returned from this afternoon. And in some cases, and I noticed not only myself, but I watched other customers. Because to me, Anne-Marie, when you do what I do for a living, the whole world's a petri dish, right? So I'm kind of watching what people do, how they react, the voice tone, body language, all that stuff. And I saw people, when they were treated nicely with a reasonable explanation of a shortage or a time delay, they were okay with it. It's like, hey, we're all in this together. This was a world event. It knocked a lot of people off their feet and cut them off at the knees, and they're still struggling with that. So most people, now you always get those people up, we don't have time on the show to talk about the fringes, right? Mm-hmm. But most people, if they're treated nicely and there's a reasonable explanation of what's going on, I found those people and myself were much more willing to be patient and not get all feathered up. Yeah. When there was no explanation or a lack of explanation, or someone just said, oh, it's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID, everything, people, they're tired of hearing that. Okay. They've had that up to here and it's going like this. They're like, no. There's got to be more to it than that. So again, I thought, boy, a little bit of coaching, a little bit of training, a little bit of how do we respond to customers? Because they're PO'd too, I mean, they didn't want it to happen to them either. But here's the thing, business owners. you are going to put a bill, an invoice, or a receipt in front of somebody and ask them to pay for your product or service, aren't you? So you can't want to get full price for your goods and services and yet give them less than full delivery on all the other stuff. You just can't do it. So when a waiter who's done absolutely nothing in terms of information, and they're glum and they're not in a good mood, and they put a receipt in front of me that says you should tip me 20, 30, 40% because you should feel sorry for me because we're in COVID, I'm not sure that washes. And I've checked with business friends of mine that say, no, it doesn't wash. Because what you're doing really is you're reinforcing bad behavior. If you do that just out of sympathy, then you're reinforcing bad behavior, and they're never going to want to get any better. And their boss or their leader will say, how are we doing tonight, folks? Oh, great. The tips are flying in. Well, what does that tell me as a leader? I'm gonna break my arm patting myself on the back because I got a great team. So it doesn't really work like that. And then they go on social media and then they slop. What's the difference? But I just maintain that if people are treated and explain things in a manner of fashion, in a polite and a courtesy way, and it's sincere, have people on the front line sincere, and not just in person, but also on the phone, right? Customer service. I have empathy. I'm sincere. I think people will cut you some slack. But when you start blaming everything on COVID, supply chain problem. That's why Sarah or Bill didn't come through today. No, that does. They're kind of far removed from the supply chain now. How much beating up can we do of the supply chain when the employee themselves, their heart isn't in it, right? So it's a dose of patience, but it's also the reality of owners not being able to pass that off as service, and that you've got to coach, you've got to train, you've got to upskill.
So important. So, and that goes back to communications, which was your first point. As a leader, we need to be able to communicate that mission. We need to be able to communicate what a job well done, the expectations for our team. And again, you could look at all those different things. You need to prioritize what's the most important for that team, the team member who's front facing for customers. What resources can you give that team member to better serve the customer? Maybe give them some common questions that they may be asked. Here's how you would respond to that. And if you can't respond to that, here's the best response. And that immediately goes to, the next chain of command. That's
boots on the ground. That's boots on the ground.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it's boots on the ground. And listen, this isn't a chalkboard session where we put a lot of theory up in this conversation and people have to figure it out. As you mentioned before, I'm a straightforward speaker. What did I say before? If it doesn't work for the goal of attaining and acquiring customers, then it's not priority A or B, right?
No.
And everything drives that. So if you can tell me that you can acquire and retain the number of customers that you need to make a profit, that you need to expand your business, that you need to keep your doors open and your lights on, if you can tell me you can do that without coaching, training, upskilling, you used the word earlier, modeling, and communicating that to a team, I may be short-staffed, but I'm going to have a staff that's on fire with passion and integrity and honesty, and my customers will cut me slack for that, and they'll want to buy from me, and hopefully they'll want to buy from me again and tell their friends about me to buy from me. That's the acquiring and the acquisition and retention of customers. That's the way it's supposed to work. Throwing bodies at a problem without any help, as I said, it doesn't make them tuba players or football players.
Gary, I know that we've only just scratched the surface. And so how can people get in contact with you? What is the best way for them to connect, to find out more, and have you work with them?
I'm available on social media. My website is www.trainingforwinners. It's spelled out FOR. So trainingforwinners.com. I have a Twitter page. I have a LinkedIn. So I invite your listeners and viewers to connect with me on LinkedIn for some further insights. Maybe we can do some work together. My email is gary@trainingforwinners.com. That's gary@trainingforwinners.com. Good old phone works too.
That's right.
925-736-9392. I'm located in Northern California, but as long as the airplanes are flying, I could be anywhere or Zoom, whatever.
Yeah, Zoom, that's right. We now know that there's a lot more technologies that we can tap into to be able to tap into the expertise of people such as yourself, no matter where they're located. Well, Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to share. I think if people just implemented a snippet of what you shared, it would have made a significant difference. What I will often say, 1% difference can be the difference that makes the difference, that, has your company be the one that people recommend and rave about, to say what quality service, even amongst a shortage of staff and all of the other things. But, they did everything with integrity and excellence. And that's why I'm going to go back. And you certainly shared lots of great insight with us today. So thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Anne Marie. I'm honored to be on your show. I'll close with this. A customer gave me a nickname once and it stuck. And I told him the other day, I still use it. I hope you still use it because you earned it. And he called me their organization's strength and conditioning coach. And I really think that's kind of what my role is, to be. And I hope in this segment that we had, and you did a delightful job emceeing this, is that I help people in the strength and conditioning areas too. So thank you very much for having me on. It was an honor to be with you, and I hope we can do some more.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gary.
This podcast is brought to you by theinfluencealliance.com. Want to influence real change with your message by becoming known as a trusted authority in your industry while building a sustainable and scalable business you love? Find out how by accessing our free podcast series at www.theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series. That's theinfluencealliance.com